The world is very different now, for man holds in his mortal hand the power to abolish all forms of human poverty and all forms of human life.
It begins a very special time of the year for us. It's the time of peace and reflection. One thing we should all be thankful for is that we live in America, where we have the freedom to change things and the opportunity to grow.
I, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, do solemnly swear
That you will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States
And will, to the best of your ability,
and will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
So help you God.
So help me God.
Every once in a while, I just need a little reminder about how crazy the world is. You know what I mean? But welcome to the show. How are you doing, man? I gotta unmute your mic.
Yeah, wonderful. Man, what an introduction. I love this. It's
Well,
so incredible. Yeah.
it's a little weird, I think, but it's kind of like a reflection of society at large. I feel like we're in a world where there is a lot of energy all the time, and it's important to remember the extreme polarity of like good and evil. I've been
Mm,
trying to do more like I want my shows to be going deeper recently, and so I've been trying to reach out to people that are interested in philosophy, divinity, things like that. You're someone I've known for a long time, and I've always thought of you as a very spiritual person, but also someone very interested in humanity and at large in the way we function in this world. I kind of wanted to introduce you. You're Zanoni. What's up, man?
hey, yeah. Yeah, we met, let's see, I think it was 2016. 2016 in Santa Cruz.
Yeah, I mean, it was before the world seemed very different. That's for sure. It was early in 2016, I think. Still.
Yeah, 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 definitely. Zanoni's an alias for me, and that connects to a hip hop project which I was doing for a while, and I kind of put that on hold. But the reason I like the alias, I was going to share this with you. I don't know if you've seen this bumper sticker or heard this motto, but Jesus, protect me from your followers.
Ooh.
And there's definitely, I mean, some of the things we might get into, they're not things that, I don't know, I feel comfortable openly like discussing with other Christians, just because they're viewed as like heresy possibly. And for the most part, like I walk a pretty like straight and narrow Christian path. So when my theology kind of veers from that, then yeah, I don't want to be ostracized by the church.
Yeah, it's funny because I think that's the way it is for anything. You could be a scientist and then you get ostracized by the Church of Science because you have found out something that's it's a little but the idea of heretical is so weird because it's, who are you encroaching on? Are you encroaching on God, or are you encroaching on man, or especially some group who's got a racket going right now? And a lot of people are really great people, but they could still be part of some kind of an organization. The way society works, organizations become less plastic, and they start to lose control over the spiritual aspects of their lives. Do you know who Nicholas Notovich was? Have you heard of that guy?
No.
I'm going to pull up a guy really quickly here. Let me see. Nicholas Notovich, he's a Russian spy. He was a Crimean, actually. So in other words, Ukrainian, but Tartar. And so he was also a Jewish adventurer, and he claimed to be a Russian aristocrat, but he was a journalist, especially, and he was really fascinated by the unknown years of Jesus. And so he became aware of this Saint Esau character that Buddhists and Hindus had in some of their books of journals of people who'd come to their temples over time. And he couldn't even get the information the first few times, but after going around the Hemus monastery, I think it was the second or third time, because he went and then they said, if you come back again, we'll show you the thing. And he's like, I'll never probably be able to make it back here. But then his donkey broke his leg or something. And so he got brought back, and then he was able to see their holy books, because he, they started to trust him more and more. And what he found, and what he kind of claimed, was that Jesus, or this Esau, who would have been Jesus of Nazareth, who'd lived in Alexandria, in northern Egypt, it followed all the lines to be this idea that maybe Jesus had spent time in India. And I don't know, that's not every Christian's first jump is to think that, but even we know that one of the apostles went to India, right? As John. So
Thomas was there. Yeah.
Thomas went to India.
Mhm.
So that
Yeah,
there's already. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, just he was martyred in India. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But there are Christian communities in India. There are the Coptics and everything else. And so this idea of Jesus being, it's almost easier for people to accept Jesus in Italy today. If you came to Rome, that's fine. But in India, it seems a little weird. What do you think about that idea?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I didn't know this connected to Nadovich. Is that how you pronounce it? I was originally kind of exposed to the idea of Jesus being in India through Elizabeth Clare Prophet. And that was kind of just the spiritual direction I was in prior to following Jesus was very ascension based. So Saint Germain, yes, Elizabeth Clare Prophet, she was kind of an offshoot of the I Am activity, which was back in like the 1920s, and actually in Chicago, that's where it originated. But yeah, she wrote some books about this. But then I veered far away from it, but I never really felt there was too much authenticity in terms of like the historical references that would kind of back some of those ideas. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really have clear thoughts about it. I definitely feel, I don't know, like based on scripture, Jesus, he lived like a pretty ordinary life as a carpenter. And for the Bible not to mention that Jesus went to India or that he was away from his community for such a long time, I don't know, that seems a little strange. And granted, a lot of people think the Bible's been edited and all types of things, but I don't know. I personally feel that Jesus was probably not traveling much prior to his ministry, but either way, I don't know if it totally matters. I guess that's my interest as well. Is like, if he went to India, if he didn't go to India, what does it totally matter?
Yeah, what are the missing years matter? Well, that's a question, I think, to you. Do you think it's something, is it heretical to wonder about the missing years, or is it gratuitous?
I don't think it affects his message at all. So whether like whatever happened during those years, and as far as we know, he was just the carpenter. Yeah, I don't know if it's that important. It doesn't change his role in terms of my beliefs of seeing him as Messiah, Savior. It doesn't change that in any way.
So in terms of what you believe that you think might be unique, or you think it would concern someone who doesn't understand it, like what are some of those things?
Yeah, definitely. I don't know. I feel, and it's tough to say that I believe it necessarily, but my background is more Buddhism, Hinduism.
Right.
And from there, I don't know. I became convinced that reincarnation was a reality. And after following Jesus, I've tried to, I don't know, kind of alter my beliefs, try to kind of adopt a more traditional view of heaven, hell. And I really don't want to say like that reincarnation is a reality, but I definitely feel that for Christians, it would be important to understand just Hindu and Buddhist metaphysics better. I find that, I don't know, there's a better way to understand Jesus's role within everything by kind of embracing the Hindu Buddhist metaphysics, as opposed to just rejecting them and saying, oh no, that's ridiculous, it's just heaven and hell, there is no rebirth or anything of that nature. So yeah, in terms of heresy, I think it would be more just the willingness to kind of entertain other belief systems. And for me, it's like, no matter if reincarnation is real, if it's not real, it doesn't matter. The main thing for me in terms of what I feel is like the most important thing is just that Jesus frees us from suffering. So if you're in a Hindu system, if you're in a Buddhist system, I truly believe that if you follow Jesus, then, or if you accept Jesus as Lord and Savior, then you will be free from that wheel of birth and rebirth. Whether that wheel of birth and rebirth is an actual thing or not, I don't know. From a Christian standpoint, I would have to say that no, it is not a real thing, but I just don't.
But it seems very Tertullian, right? Because our ideas of Christianity are also, what we've decided is heretical come down to who was killing who about Paul's words, and saying that Paul's words were the words of God, which is a very specific part of the Bible. We can talk all about the history of the Bible and everything else, but that is, a lot of the Crusades was literally, do you think when Paul's sending a letter to Corinth or Thessalonica that is God speaking? And if anyone else did that they were not God, and that caused the Bogomils to get killed, and so many groups of Christians that were, and Muslims too. A lot of Muslims in Austria, in parts of Slavic lands that were basically Christian in a lot of ways. They were like Gnostic Christians, but they were considered completely heretical to that extent. When we think about Christianity's association with the Veda, though, let's go back a bit about why that comes naturally to you. You said you have a natural inclination, or you were raised more with Buddhism and Hinduism. What's your background in bio?
Yeah, I was raised Catholic, and then when I was about 15, well, actually, it was funny. I had this night in my mid-20s where I traced back all the decisions that had led to that point where I was in my life. And I realized that it all stemmed from reading this book, Sophie's World, by Jostein Gaarder. I don't know if you know this book, but it's written by a Norwegian author, and it's a history of philosophy coupled with kind of like an Alice in Wonderland surreal story. And when I read that book in 7th grade, it just opened my mind to philosophy. I started to question a lot of things. But also, I think it did bring me closer to God, because definitely like 7th grade, I started to get, I don't know, a more intense focus with my Catholicism. And then, yeah, the deeper I got into philosophy, though, then I just drifted away from Catholicism. That kind of left me with existentialism. That was like as far as I could go in terms of philosophy, because I was really seeking for why are we here? What's our purpose? Not questions of ethics or, what's real, what's not real, but more like how should we live? What are we doing here? And existentialism, it only takes you so far. And then I guess Kierkegaard, Kierkegaard's a good bridge. Just take that leap of faith, jump into the unknown, into something that you can't completely understand rationally. And even though I was existential in terms of my philosophy, I tried to be an atheist. And I couldn't, there's something in the core of me which it just can't accept that. This world is so miraculous, it's right. So unbelievable that to think like, oh, this is just some random configuration or whatever, like I can never identify with that. So yeah, I remained a theist. And then I guess from existentialism, like it kind of leaves you in an unpleasant state, like Sartre's nausea, you feel that angst, that anxiety. And from there, I just kind of noticed that a friend pointed out to me, a friend who was into Buddhism when I was 17, just pointed out just brought Buddhism to my attention, I guess, because it wasn't really in my awareness at that time.
Yeah, he's like, hey, it's pretty chill. They're pretty chill. Yeah. They did it to me too.
yeah, totally. And I wasn't seeing that in the Catholic Church I was going to. I was seeing, I don't know, just not a lot of happiness, and right. And that might be specific to my church I was going to. I'm sure there's a lot of Catholic churches. I've been to Catholic churches that are just like filled with joy, but the one I was going to is definitely like not representative of that. So yeah, seeing the Buddhist monks and the Dalai Lama, all these figures, I was like, okay, Thich Nhat Hanh, okay, that's my goal. I want to attain this peace that they have. And I can't look at a priest, I can't look at any other kind of Catholic figure I'm seeing, the Pope, I guess, and see that like deep peace. And the Pope might have it. I don't know.
I don't know. Thich Nhat Hanh's pretty
Pope
cool.
John Paul. Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of hard to beat this guy. No offense to the Pope or anything like that. That's not what we're getting at. But whoa, like this guy is the coolest guy. It's so sad that he passed away because he was just amazing. But
he wrote a great combo book too, Living Buddha, Living Christ, which merges the two philosophies. Because I don't feel they're incompatible, following Jesus and being Buddha. But yeah, so when I was 17, I had a year off of school. It was my senior year of high school. I got to graduate early and went off to Nepal and turned 18 at Kopan Monastery in Kathmandu on this silent Tibetan Buddhist meditation retreat. And it was beautiful. It was wonderful. At the end of it, I thought about becoming a Tibetan Buddhist monk. The retreat was catered toward Westerners, lots of Europeans there. And there were about 5 people who took on robes at the end of the retreat. And I was thinking about it. And at that time, I knew the Matrix 2 and 3 were coming out at some point in the future. This was 99? Yeah. And, or maybe, 99. And I was like, okay, man, if I become a monk, I don't know if I'll be able to see those for sure. I might just delay this, like, I don't know, until those come out. Check them out. Those are like my last like samsaric desires. Because the first one was like so strong, and it was so disappointing to see them.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. That is a huge wow. That is amazing.
But from there, it was cool. On that retreat, I met someone who he also was very into existentialism, and he introduced me to Krishnamurti, and just basically like it broadened my view of like what enlightenment is, what our purpose in life is.
What are your feelings on Krishnamurti? Like what an
Yeah,
interesting Anakin Skywalker kid, right?
I love Krishnamurti. I feel there's like limitations though to what he talks about, because he's so based on it's so empirical that all you can know is really like what you're experiencing, and he doesn't really get into afterlife. He doesn't get into much beyond this life. He did originally, when
it's originally they wanted him to be their savior for Madame Blavatsky and Theosophist, and he's like, I don't think that's gonna work out. Basically.
He was into it, but then what happened is, so it was pretty phenomenal. Katumi, I believe Katumi was his teacher. Katumi, it could be El Moria, I'm not sure. He wrote a book called At the Feet of the Master, and I think it might be El Moria. But one of the ascendant masters that the Theosophical Society kind of introduced, he was having these interactions with the spiritual being. And the spiritual being was instructing. This whole book is a dictation. And then at one of the sessions, he decided, okay, I'm just going to walk through this person and see if I can walk through them. And he just walked through them, and he was able to. And that destroyed his belief, which to me, I mean, I don't know. You're dealing with a spirit. I feel like you could walk through that spirit probably. But for some reason, that was a big thing for him. He thought like this is a flesh being or something, and if I can walk through this flesh, then it's just my illusion. And so that caused him to dissolve that whole cult that was based on him and his younger brother. A cool story from that, actually, they got this massive training. They were found in India, and then the Theosophical Society put them through this rigorous training. And part of the training was that anything they had a desire for, the Theosophical Society would just flood them with that desire. So if they liked bicycle riding, him and his brother would just ride bikes all day until they hated it completely. And if they had a love for peanut butter, then they would just get nothing but peanut butter until they were completely sick of it. So yeah,
That's
it's this
brilliant
weird-
though, trying to teach you to get over existentialism quick,
Yeah,
That's the
yeah,
way to
get
do it.
over the desires. Yeah. But from Krishnamurti and this friend Gadi, who I met at the Tibetan Buddhist retreat, he also introduced me to just other religions that have similar mystical approaches: Christian mysticism, Sufism, Kabbalah, and Hinduism. He expanded my approach to things so that it wasn't just this narrow Buddhist mindset. And Hinduism I really connected with, because Hinduism incorporated God. Buddhism was not, that wasn't a major factor. And yeah, then I was pretty much on that path for quite some time. Started doing hip hop, which incorporated all that stuff. There's one song on Spotify. Actually, I just saw yesterday, it got taken off Spotify, but it's on Apple Music.
Oh yeah.
I'm contacting TuneCore to see why.
Where do I type in to find it?
Zanoni, Zanoni, and then the song is Go Beyond Ego, but it's all one word. Go Beyond Ego. Yeah, I was on this whole hip hop path, and then read the Bible. I read the New Testament, and that just wrecked everything. My whole life got restructured. Yeah, that's it.
There you go.
So yeah, I was in this live hip hop band. We're doing raps about everything, things you would love, probably, like Terrence McKenna, like all these different people. Yeah, and just lots of interesting references within the hip hop. There's a project called Intervisionist. And then I read the New Testament. I went off to Santa Cruz, actually, years before I met you. And I read the New Testament on that trip because I had always tried to read the Bible. And yeah, I want to familiarize myself with all religions. And I'd start with Genesis, and then I'd get to Leviticus, and I would just give up. I was like, okay, I do not connect with this. I'm not getting the same spiritual nourishment that I get from the Vedas, from Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads.
Leviticus is a very Lord of the Flies kind of book. You know what I mean? It's like, and then here's what you do if someone steals someone's daughter. Yeah, okay, calm down, everybody. Yeah.
yeah. When I got to all that stuff, I was like, okay, I can't keep going.
Yeah,
and then,
it's cool when you do it with Jesuit staging, though. If you imagine, like, literally, this is how bad it got. People were trading daughters. This is the world at its worst. It's in the Bible. That's impressive, because like a lot of the other religious books are about how I ate butter and lived happily ever after. They're not the same as, there's a lot of like angst in the Bible, just saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I connected with that. I went to Trinity College in Dublin from high school after having that year off where I did the Buddhist retreat. And I was studying philosophy, but by the time I got there, I was so into Eastern philosophy, and I read tons of Hermann Hesse, all these things that just made Western philosophy seem like not so interesting, too analytical, as the term goes, mental masturbation, just endless debates about like, where are we really getting with this? And I decided to leave
it's like
Trinity.
6 fans of the dialectic right now. They're just like angry, but yeah go ahead. That's right.
Now I love that stuff though, which is fast. But when I was really searching for like my purpose in life, it didn't seem like that was it. And the Enlightenment, I mean, it's crazy. Like Schopenhauer just took Buddhism and made that his philosophy, like he just extracted the whole thing, and then he gets credit for it, Schopenhauer. Like Buddha said this a long time ago. So yeah, beginning of my second year at Trinity, I left school, then went on this whole hip hop path, returned to Ireland to visit friends, and was doing hip hop in Ireland and was busking. Do you know that term? I don't know if they use that in the States at the moment. Busking?
And we work at a restaurant?
No, it's more like street performing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I don't think we use it much, but yes.
Yeah. In Europe, that's like the main term for it. So I was busking and like doing hip hop on the street with this friend, freestyling, doing all this stuff. And these amazing Christian missionary women, beautiful women, they came up to me and started talking to me. And that's when things shifted a little bit. They planted a major seed for me. They said, just read the New Testament. The Old Testament is historical, it's history. But read the New Testament, go back and read the Old Testament, let's start there. And I didn't do that for like a good 3 years. I wasn't completely convinced. But then I decided, okay, I'm going to read the New Testament, and read it and just saw a completely different view of Jesus than what I had received from, I guess, the New Age, from definitely that Elizabeth Clare Prophet, I Am Activity teachings. Those teachings, they portray Jesus more as an ascended master, and
Right.
we're all meant to become ascended masters, and we're just meant to become enlightened like Jesus. And when I read the New Testament, I saw Jesus saying that, he definitely doesn't lower the bar to this false grace that some of Christianity embraces, which is that, oh, I believe in Jesus, that's it. Jesus is saying, be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect, really like strive for perfection. But then I felt all this mercy being poured out, which is connected to the cross, and the ascension teachings did not emphasize the cross. The ascension teachings were mainly about the resurrection. All of us can resurrect, we can all ascend to heaven. And the ascension teachings are kind of strange, Theosophical Society, all that stuff, because originally it was designed as these teachings that, like Enoch, if we just become perfect and walk in, just perfect righteousness with God, then we can enter heaven and take our bodies with us. But the I Am Activity shifted that, especially after the founder of it died.
Yeah.
He kind of, I don't, it's unclear exactly like how he died, as far as I know, but a few months before he died, and this might be like just inspiration he was getting, but he created this dispensation that you can actually die and still ascend. You don't have to walk into heaven like Enoch.
Lucky.
Yeah. So let's see. Yeah, I've understood the cross and connected it with Hinduism and Buddhism, and understood it as, because I don't know, I had a hang up, I think, with the idea of sin as well. Like, I don't know, I start to understand sin as more just immoral actions. We grow up with this shame and guilt, at least those of us who are kind of raised in a Christian Judaic framework, just shame and guilt connected with that term. But I just understood.
So like just different choices that aren't socially acceptable. Is that what you're saying?
More like harming others, I think.
Okay.
Like whenever we harm others, I consider that sin, I guess.
Yeah.
So
that would be pretty bad. But I mean, in terms of a sin, you thought is that all a sin is to you, or?
For me, well, it's interesting. Growing up Catholic, if I start to understand according to catechism, if you don't go to church on Sundays, that's a sin.
Right.
So there's
I was raised Catholic, and they said basically it was that that righteousness is like a bullseye, and then if you miss the bullseye any amount, that's sin. Sin is the
well, that's interesting.
Distance
Yeah, I mean,
from perfection.
That does connect to the idea of sin as like just missing the mark, and repentance is turning around, walking the other direction. But I would say that was a big revelation for me, reading the New Testament for the first time, was just this idea that everything I had been taught prior to that, in terms of this Catholic upbringing, like, this is not in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It doesn't even say to go to church, really. Like the early believers would meet on the first day of the week, which is Sunday, and they would gather in order to share teachings with one another. We didn't have a Bible. Right. They didn't have a Bible. So yeah, that was like the way to like find out what Jesus's teachings are, what we should be doing, how we should be living. But I didn't see Jesus saying like, yeah, you have to go to church every Sunday, like that. That just became a custom. So yeah, it was amazing to just see all the things which I thought were connected with the Bible and actually weren't. They were just this whole offshoot of Catholicism. So I felt a lot of freedom from that. But mainly, yeah, just connecting Jesus's death on the cross with really this redemption from negative karma as well. Even if we look at it from a reincarnation aspect, like all these past lifetimes, according to Hinduism and Buddhism, we're carrying that into this current lifetime. And in order to get free, according to Hinduism and Buddhism, it's a really difficult process. You have a lot of asceticism. And I was doing ridiculous amounts of spiritual practice at the time. I was meditating 2 hours a day, Vipassana based for the most part, and then doing all these extra decrees, violet flame decrees, which are connected to Saint Germain, all this stuff, and walking in ultra purity. I was completely celibate from the age of 24 onward. I was just on this very ultra pure path. And it was actually pretty easy for me because I was so set on the idea that I never want to reincarnate, so
Yeah, right.
it's like,
That would help,
okay,
I guess.
okay, so if it's like a matter of engaging in something sexual or not reincarnating, like it's very easy to reject like any earthly things.
Yeah.
Because the I am activity, that's one thing which I really love about it compared to Christianity, is that it took a very firm stance on that. Like, you will never ascend if you have a lifetime where you're engaged in lots of sexual activity, anything of that nature.
And gluttony and existential fervor. And we see this all the time, though. Like in real life, people become obsessed with roller coaster lifestyle, and they get syphilis and die at 30, or, worse somehow.
Yeah. No, completely. Yeah. So just like feeling that redemption aspect. So from Hinduism and Buddhism, yeah, we're carrying all this negative karma into this life. And this is like a big thing. This is why I feel like I'm frustrated the way like Christianity has been shared with India and,
right,
Buddhist culture, just because it's presented in this very narrow framework and there's no openness to other cultures' ideas. And I don't know, I find that the idea of Jesus dying on the cross, that's very much connected to Judaism. It's very difficult to understand that concept without having a firm understanding of Judaism. Just the idea that,
atonement.
like animals had to be sacrificed every time sins were accumulated, and
Stuff
Jesus
costs you. Existentialism costs you. Everything existential in Leviticus. That's the reason why it gets really rough when you get to Leviticus, because it's like, okay, it's a certain amount of chickens to kill somebody. That's where it gets down to in reality. It's like, if you steal a candy bar, you have to give it back. But if you ate the candy bar, it's the cost of the candy bar plus the tax. And then there's like karma continues in these interesting ways,
Yeah, completely. Yeah. So yeah, I felt just this freedom in the sense that I believed I had been carrying some karmic debt, whatever it was from previous lifetimes. I had to follow this rigorous, like I had to maintain a lot of different practices in order to possibly attain ascension. And I thought I was on the path. That was the other thing. Like, I wasn't feeling like I was off path. I wasn't deviating from the path, but like no sex, no self-sex. I was like on the path. And then I saw this teaching of Jesus of, it's not his teaching, just the way he made the sacrifice for us all. And I understood it and knew that I could go to heaven at the end of this life, and that I would not have to return to a realm of suffering. And that was purely dependent upon Jesus and not dependent upon me and all the stuff I'm doing in order to reach this high level of perfection. So yeah, just getting back to what I was saying before, like just sharing the gospel with Hindus and Buddhists, I feel it would be much more effective if we just embrace this philosophy of, okay, yes, let's imagine, and who knows, that reincarnation is real. If that is the case, then Jesus fits in perfectly with this metaphysical system, and Jesus frees us from the system by dying for our karmic debt. Jesus died to clear you of all debt from previous lives, and because of Jesus, we can just go into heaven and not be carrying this burden with us. One of my favorite quotes, I'm often misquoting it, is because I flip up the two different things, but Jesus said, "My burden is easy and my yoke is light." Or is it, "My yoke is light and my burden is easy"? My burden is easy and my yoke is light. But that's really what I felt. I felt I was carrying this heavy burden of like, okay, I gotta like do all these practices every day, and then it's just like, I'm free. I can go to heaven, praise God, and I will continue to follow Jesus. That's kind of the caveat, is like, you have to continue to walk in righteousness. You can't just like, okay, I'm gonna party, Jesus died for my sins, continue to walk in righteousness. And if you miss that high mark of perfection in some way, if you don't attain perfect self-realization, according to Yogananda, I've spoken about Yogananda on our own. If you miss that high mark, there's still this redemption factor from Jesus where you will not have to suffer after this life.
I mean, that's an interesting thing because it goes, the Theosophic Society would the idea of the ascended master doesn't work in that sort of an atonement ritual, because in an atonement ritual, you have to have an equivalence. So you could maybe have an ascended master, a sacrifice for a single generation, like maybe even all of a single generation, if they're really ascended mastery, I would think. But to be a past, present, and future atonement sacrifice requires a certain level of divinity, no? So it makes it kind of calls into question this idea of ascended master. It means Jesus was probably, Yeshua was probably something more, right?
Definitely. Yeah, for sure. And it was interesting around that time period. I started to find some more things about the Theosophical Society that kind of made that whole practice seem somewhat demonic in some way. I mean, it's interesting. One of Blavatsky's, I'm pretty sure Blavatsky put out this magazine, which they originally called Lucifer. They had this big focus on Lucifer. And all of that was just like definitely ominous, and
well, how so? I mean, because there's a lot of what we're told is, hey, Lucifer is the morning star as opposed to the bright morning star. Maybe, and Lucifer is also a misliteration of phosphore from Erasmus translation in the 1600s, 1500s, right? So it's supposed to be Venus or something in Isaiah. What do they believe about Lucifer? Is Lucifer supposed to be this evil character to them, or?
Well, just getting back to that, also they created this thing, the Lucis Trust,
right? Alison Foster Bailey.
Yeah.
And they wrote the Great Invocation, which became for the UN, when the UN summit happened in 1940, whatever. They did the Great Invocation ritual that Alice Bailey wrote in a treatise of white magic.
Yeah. So I don't know. I just feel there's a connection between Lucifer and Satan, and I definitely have more traditional beliefs about who Satan is. My heretical side would come in by praying for Satan.
Oh yeah.
Jesus says, pray for your enemies. There's a lot of Christians who feel like, no,
this
Satan
doesn't seem very heretical at all. It's a literal quote. Do what Jesus said.
Yeah, but
doing what Jesus said would be heretical to a lot of Christians.
Yeah, from this Christian viewpoint, it's like, no, Satan and all the fallen angels, they are condemned to hell, and there is no way for them to ever attain redemption. That might be the case, I don't know, but I will continue to pray that they receive redemption. That's all up to God. If they are forever condemned, all right. I don't know what's going on exactly with that.
Yeah.
But definitely, like, I feel in my spirit like there's a way. I mean, even if like this is my prayer, it's a little far out, but like just bring Satan and all the fallen angels, all the demonic elements of this world, let them go to heaven, even if it's a separate compartment of heaven, where they're just completely isolated, but they're not suffering. They're not in like some weird torturous state. And then when they kind of work things out with God, they like start to accept things. Because I feel there's a lot of resistance from that realm, just get a lot of animosity directed toward God.
The idea of hell as a torture chamber is very medieval, but most of what the Pope has said recently, and I think a lot of the Catholic doctrine has been around, is the idea of loneliness. Like, so heaven is closeness to God, integration into God's kingdom and celestial bureaucracy. Hell is further and further solitude, emptiness, the idea of space.
Yeah.
I mean,
I've heard, just on that note, I've heard once that the first torturous experience you feel in hell is complete disconnection from God. That while you're on earth, there's this loose connection going on. Even if you're an atheist, there's ways in which you can kind of call out and stuff. But once you get to hell, it's just like, and you just feel that, and you're like, gosh, I can't even call out in this suffering. I'm trapped completely.
I mean, and so also we have this idea of Dante's Inferno, where there are rings of hell, right? And so it almost would seem related to that idea of karma or of incarnations, that you get further and further away from connection and empathy, and that would be a suffering that would be like no other.
For sure, yeah. And it's like hell is very much a strong reality within Hinduism and Buddhism as well. It's in all of the major faiths. I consider the major faiths Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, Judaism. And Judaism maybe a little less so. I mean, not in terms of major faiths, but in terms of the concept of hell, there might not be that big a focus. And yeah, definitely with Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, and Buddhism, hell is a major thing. But for Hinduism and Buddhism, it's a temporary realm. And the tricky element of that, though, is like thinking that possibly going to hell, just the idea that you can actually get out of hell
after 10,000 years of suffering. but the other thing is,
it might be misleading.
Yeah. Well, you have to climb every step that you fall down back up, right? So if you go through hell to the base of it, then the idea is you still have to walk out of it, which is a long journey. And it's not like you just float up. It's a lot harder to go upwards to escalate than to decline, right?
Yeah.
To ascend.
And to think about, just the experience of Earth, like being on Earth can be painful, very painful. And to have like one single day in hell, like that would be insane. Think about being tortured on Earth, like being tortured for one day in hell. Gosh, yeah. So, and then you like expand that to just a human lifetime. Hinduism and Buddhism expand it to like beyond that. We're dealing with a long time period.
So these ideas of the Vedic hell, what are they like? Are they Vedic hell? Is it like literally like torturing pots?
It's similar, yeah. It's Dante's Inferno.
I mean, it's interesting because we have the Hieronymus Bosch paintings, and we have these kind of Vedic concepts of trial by fires and Naraka, Yamloka, where sinners are tormented after death. And there's 28 hells. The idea of 28 hells. So I mean, that's interesting. It's just it seems to me that if these things are described in more detail, then maybe our understanding of hell, the 7 rings of Dante or something, there's 3 different sets of each or something, that make it up.
Yeah. And connected with this, so coming out of that metaphysical framework and then embracing Christianity, really trying to embrace Christianity, like, yes, I will believe this, heaven, hell, still kind of struggling with that. Like, hell just seems really harsh. Like,
yeah,
eternal hell.
It just seems like really, to me, it always seemed really medieval. But when you show examples of it thousands of years earlier in India, I don't know how for sure.
Yeah, no, it's definitely prior to the medieval time period.
Yeah, so it seems like it's not. That calls into question my whole idea. Oh well, it was just invented by pagans in the Middle Ages. Well, no, and then it sounds like that's the thing that exists. In permanency.
Completely, yeah. And going with that, so like I don't know. So I was eternal hell. That seemed too harsh to me. Hell, right. I already accepted that as a possibility for some humans after this life because of the Hindu Buddhist background. But yeah, I struggled with the eternal aspect of it. And I guess like at some point I kind of felt, and this is kind of weird, like within some elements of Christianity, there's this sense that we can pray, we can kind of hear from God a little bit. And some people might think that's like a little far out, but I don't know. I prayed and I felt like I was kind of receiving guidance from God to not discuss reincarnation. And that's when I really adopted this, like, okay, even though I still kind of have this sense that, yeah, reincarnation seems like such a more merciful version of hell. That's kind of how I view reincarnation. It's like, okay, it's this merciful version. It's not this like eternal fire and brimstone, but it is Chinese torture. where you have this like water drop on your head constantly. And the whole idea in Hinduism and Buddhism is eventually you will hit a lifetime where it'll be so painful that you just surrender. And that's when you surrender everything to God, you surrender everything to the spiritual path. Like, yes, I will do whatever it takes to get out of here because I am not in control of this experience. There's how do I get out of suffering? And the only way is to like turn to God in the spiritual path. But yeah, I was feeling this inclination and not really discuss that. And I tried to do that. And then someone like, I don't know, I got involved in like, there's like prophecy circles where people prophesy over other Christians. And it's nothing like, it can be incredibly profound, but oftentimes it's just words of encouragement. And someone told me that this woman said that she felt that she was hearing that God appreciated my understanding of history. And I just connected that with my theology. And then I became more open to discussing these things. But the concern with talking about reincarnation is like, if Christians latch on to that concept, that's a nightmare. Because for Christians to think that, okay, I'm redeemed through Jesus, but then, yeah, I don't know, I can live like kind of however I want and like be engaged in like lots of sexual stuff, lots of, I don't know, just debauchery, and then maybe next lifetime, like without that deep understanding of like how that system works, like no one, when they really understand the system, would ever want to entertain the idea of reincarnating. But I do meet a lot of people who are like, oh, I'd be happy to reincarnate. And that's a, I don't know, that's a view of life which I personally can't understand. I'm like, not just like
what's St. Augustine's quote? Oh Lord, help me to be pure, but not yet. Right?
Yeah. I think it connected to chastity in particular, right? Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I feel like reincarnation could cause Christians to adopt that view where it's like, oh, okay. If it's not a matter of hell, but it's a matter of reincarnation, then okay, maybe the stakes aren't so high for me to live this very moral life. And that was my connection too, with like praying to God and asking like, God, why did you introduce this concept of eternal hell? Like, this is so intense, especially if it's not true. Like, why is this allowed? And I don't know, it could be true. So I'm not like taking a firm stance on that. But what
it's the end of times, at a certain point, there's only so many infinite lives you can have,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's another thing. Yeah. We think of reincarnation as like infinite possibilities according to Hinduism and Buddhism. But when we combine Islamic and Christian eschatology, which is pretty much identical, Islam believes that the world will end when Jesus returns. That Jesus is very much a part of their metaphysics as Isa. So with that concept in mind, then it seems like there might be a cutoff to reincarnation, that like you're given so many options. Maybe we've had like options.
We're running out of yugas and it's been enough avatars or something. Yeah.
But yeah, I forget precisely where I was going with. Oh, so yeah, eternal hell.
Yeah.
Like just praying to God about that and like, God, why would you allow this concept to exist? Maybe it does exist. And the main thing that I get, because it's still difficult for me to accept that concept of eternal hell, is that it is an important concept. And that's why I am like hesitant to discuss some of these things, because it causes people to make a choice. If you're told there's only two options, eternal hell or eternal heaven, for some people that really causes them to walk on a righteous path. If you're told you can enter eternal heaven after this life and never experience any suffering, or you could live like a decent life and reincarnate and become a human again and, eventually get to eternal paradise. Some people might choose that, and that's where I feel this really demonic entrapment thing comes in. And I connect that to the ascension teachings, where I feel that this idea that, I don't know, you have to become this ascended master. That is kind of possibly Satan's way of keeping people entrapped within a cycle of birth and rebirth.
I mean, it seems like so many people are gung-ho on doing, like, from what I remember I was talking to a friend earlier about the Gita and some of the rules in the Veda in general. And the things that people do all the time now are the things that will cause you to become an ant or a bug or something like there's like certain consequences for, you know, certain kinds of gluttony, for eating certain kinds of animals, for, you know, certain kinds of disrespects that actually cause harm, right? And it seems like people have just taken for granted that those are part of their lifestyle now. So I mean, the idea that they can reincarnate but then end up as a human again, I think is called into question, because it's like, you know, I think people don't realize how expensive their karma is.
No, completely. Yes. I mean, and this is huge. And this is why, like, reincarnation, it's difficult to even talk about that with any Christians. Like, I can't, well, one, they just won't accept it. And yeah, as Zanoni.
You got to give him that Roger Miller song, right? You know, if I was a bird and you was a fish, what would we do? I guess we'd wish for reincarnation. You know, yeah. There's always a country song about everything.
Yeah, yeah. Have you heard? What is it? Parked Out by the Lake. Do you know that song?
No.
Well, parked out by the lake, 80 miles from Santa Fe. Okay, this is it's a country parody song.
We'll be sending country parodies. It'll be a thing.
Yeah. So, like, there has to be a full understanding of the reincarnation system, like, completely, you know, in order for that to be at least like a safe concept to make life decisions with. Because with Tibetan Buddhism, this was a big thing on the retreat back when I was 17. Heavy emphasis on, to be a human, it's considered a precious human life birth, a precious human birth. Those are the terms for it. This is a precious human birth, and it's so difficult to attain. You know, if you're in hell, you're experiencing so much pain that you can't think about anything spiritual. You can't advance. If you're in an animal realm, you're caught up in so many different factors, survival factors, all these different things that you can't really focus on the spiritual aspects. If you're in heaven, and this is the trap with Hinduism and Buddhism, I don't know if you've looked into this, but like with Hinduism and Buddhism, heaven is a temporary place. So you could be born there because of how much great karma you've accumulated on earth. You've done all these amazing things, you've done different practices, but you haven't attained full self-realization. And you enter heaven, and then when you're in heaven, you're kind of like wealthy people who are born into wealth and just have
super soft life. Yeah.
Yeah, and just take it for granted. This is the way, like, I guess I'm special in some way. So you're like born into this situation, and you just think like it's, I don't know, you take it for granted, and you don't do much spiritual work, especially because there's so much pleasure too. Like there's a lot of, as Islam describes, Islam says like a lot of earthly pleasures are just a foretaste of heavenly pleasures. So in heaven, everything, food, all this stuff, you know, sex with Islam, not with Christianity, but everything is enhanced in heaven.
Right. Material, emotional, hormonal responses are not the thing. Right. Yeah.
So in heaven, you just get caught up in the pleasure for Hinduism and Buddhism. And then eventually, after a longer time period, you know, not a human life, maybe, I'm not precise on what the spans of life are, but they're definitely longer. But eventually your karma runs out, and you've kind of become in this, you've become entranced in this heavenly spell in some ways. And you've had a great experience, which you deserve because of all these things you did before it. But then you have to reincarnate. And oftentimes from heaven, I think that you would usually come back to like earth, you know, to do more work. You wouldn't go all the way down to hell or anything like that. But nonetheless, like to be a human, you have the perfect balance of suffering and pleasure to progress on the spiritual path. And it's not guaranteed that you're going to get a human birth. So it's like, yeah, just gotta really be careful about how we move forward.
Right. And then also the idea of heaven is interesting. Did you ever watch that show, The Good Place? Have you seen this?
Yeah, I was so into it until it became The Bad Place. And I was like, oh man, okay. That twist threw me off, but I've heard that something changes again or something.
Yeah, no, I mean, I watched it all the way through. And I guess I don't want to do spoilers if you might ever watch the show, so I'll tread lightly. But it's an interesting show, and you've already exposed the first season's one, but there's 5 seasons deep, and it's 10 years old now almost, or something. I mean,
Yeah, and
so it's okay that we're talking about it.
Needs to be that needs to be shared. That spoiler, because like,
right. I mean, it's important, but I think it's a huge lesson for people. They're going through I think people figure it out pretty quick though. But the idea that these people are told they're special, they're so good that they get to go to the good place and nobody else gets to go. And then being happy about that makes them a bit evil, right? And eventually they realize the entire place really is an evil place, and they themselves hell is other people, to that extent, because they're not good people. But they do progress, I'll say, and regardless of all the other seasons, there's a lot of good stuff in there. I would say the finale bit is, let's say everything does work out and you do end up in the good place. How much fun can you have for how long before you're exhausted? And I know this seems like such a dumb question, because I feel like we've all asked, maybe not us all, but you and I for sure asked this to somebody when we were 5 to 10 years old. Would you get bored of heaven? You know what I mean? And they're like, no, you'll never get bored of heaven. Well, this show presupposes that eventually you would want to go out and do some work for God, because you just had so much fun forever, But I wonder, what do you think that makes sense? Or do you think that, it's true that we would just be stoked to sit there and smile at our master?
There's different concepts of heaven, of course. So like Revelation, the description of heaven is kind of us just in this state of awe, worshiping God. And I could see how some people could view that as boring, but I don't know, if you think about the internal experience that would be going on during that, like you are in like the highest ecstasy, just like, wow. You don't need activity. Activity often is designed to offset boredom. It's like, okay, we'll do all these things to stay entertained. But if you're just experiencing like the highest joy, and you don't need to be doing activities really. And I think that's kind of similar to like the Buddhist concept of nirvana or moksha within Hinduism. It's like you're just at this state of like high equilibrium, high joy, high peace, where anything external is just like, why bother? You just feel so much ecstasy. It's like you don't need anything else. But yeah, like with the ascension path is interesting because, and this is Yogananda also. Yogananda is very much ascension teachings, which autobiography of a yogi we discussed on our own. So with that path, the idea is that the ascended masters are serving humanity, and they're continuing to help people from this other side. Now, I guess when I was in that state of mind, in terms of like thinking of ascension, there's an element of it that seems a little solemn, I would say. And then when things shifted to Jesus, there's this great quote, you know this quote growing up Catholic, that not until you become like children will you enter the kingdom of heaven.
Right.
Yeah. And then there's another one, which I love, which is no eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind can imagine what God has prepared for those who love him. And I just started to have this like completely different vision of heaven. That can be this incredibly creative place, kind of like What Dreams May Come. Have you seen that film?
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, where like he loves painting and then life becomes paint, So I feel like there could be this very much like individualistic experience we're having, but shared with others, kind of like this collective hallucination of all our greatest joys. So yeah, I definitely feel like heaven is much more playful, I guess, and much more creative. And I think sometimes we put, this film, if you haven't seen this, definitely check it.
I just, in case, I was realizing as you said, like, just in case anyone hasn't seen this movie, like take the time to watch What Dreams May Come, because what an amazing movie by Robin Williams, or with Robin Williams. Yeah.
And it's really interesting to watch after he passed away. I mean, after he committed suicide, and there's things in the film where there's a particular line he says in the film which just gives me chills, like in relation to his life. I think he says, "You haven't seen anything yet," cliche term, but the way it's said, like in the context of what's happening in the film. And in connection to his life. It's definitely
It was so ahead of its time, I felt. I mean, like this, some of the stuff just, it looks like today's AI paintings or something, you know, very Hieronymus Bosch.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so
But
just
heaven being a place that is a creative place or a space.
it's creative, it's playful, it's not austere. I think, yeah, like we put God in a box, you know, we put God in this weird sterile box. I sometimes feel in my like connection with God, I'm wondering like if God feels in that box also. You know, like I think about Jesus. I've spoken about this with other Christian friends and stuff. Like, does Jesus like joke around? Does Jesus make faces? Like, you know, this, or does Jesus feel like these ascended masters, like who are just like very much like having to maintain this appearance of, you know, perfect equilibrium and enlightenment, self-realization. Yeah, so I
some of the best yogis I've ever known joke around a lot. You know what I mean? Like they could be like 70, 80-year-old Indian dude with like a very playful spirit. So
yeah,
I would be surprised if Jesus was into, you know, some
yeah,
like really not painful practical jokes, right?
yeah.
A whoopee cushion? I could see Jesus with a whoopee cushion. Yeah.
Totally, yeah. And like just we think of heaven as a place, it's like the Talking Head song, you know, like heaven is a place where nothing ever happens, right? And that is because of, as far as my understanding of those lyrics, because it's so perfect, you know, like how, like you can't really do anything if
How
like
do you
all you're
improve?
dealing with is perfection. Like no one can make any mistakes, no one can say any bad jokes, like nothing can really happen. It just like nothing happens. And I have this different concept of heaven, which is like if it can happen here on earth, then it can happen in heaven a little bit. I mean, not everything on earth. I don't see violence, you know, all these horrible things. I view heaven as a place completely free of all these horrible things we witness on earth, you know, free of wars, free of atrocities, and yet at the same time filled with all the beautiful creative elements and maybe even reflections of them, you know, maybe even the films that depict these negative things. I recently rewatched Heat, which I hadn't seen in high school. And it's such a great film. You know, I feel there's like a weird anointing on that film, whereas like it's just like a pretty flawless film. And I feel it's a reflection, like God witnesses that stuff all the time on earth. You know, God's witnessing violence on a daily basis. And for those things to carry into heaven where we can see the reflections, but we don't actually have that stuff, except maybe in the form of like a paintball game or something, like, or some like adrenaline type thing where like people don't actually die. Or if they do, they just have like a weird experience of coming to Earth for like 3 days or something, you know, like a simulation of Earth.
Yeah.
But yeah, I
or
love
a rapid reincarnation, you know.
yeah, very
Be a fly.
yeah, and then back to heaven. But yeah, I definitely feel that. I mean, I don't know for certain, of course, but I have this intuition that God loves these creative things we've done on Earth. I love how like art is the center of the word Earth in English.
Interesting.
And I feel like that's a lot of our purpose. I mean, for me personally, I feel my purpose in life is to share Jesus because Jesus says to do that. You know, becoming a Christian is like, okay, what do I do now? Jesus is like, go talk about me. I mean, you got free because of me. So that's not something that you keep to yourself. You know, it's not in this desire like, oh, I need to like make this person become Christian. It's like more, no, I'm grateful that I feel this freedom. I sincerely feel like this is it for me. Like this is my last lifetime. I'm going to heaven after this life. No more suffering. And because of that, that's something that I want to share with others and just like offer that as a possibility. Whether anyone chooses to accept that or not, that's completely up to them. But it's my responsibility to at least share that, you know. And then in following Jesus, like just seeing Matthew 25, there's this big focus on when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was sick and in prison, you visited me, you comforted me. And that was a big shift for me coming out of all the New Age Buddhist stuff is so much of my focus was on just my own self-realization. And then when I saw these teachings, like, no, focus on others, and so personally, like that's a big, those are my main, that's my purpose in life, is to share Jesus, serve others, but then art, this is where like this creative factor comes in. So much of what I love about life is just appreciating art and creating art. And I sense that will trickle into heaven somehow, that Jane Eyre, will be a book that we can read in heaven. And it's not just this dark Gothic thing that can only be experienced on earth.
I mean, it seems like Yeshua's got this good idea going where you help people out instead of just, like you said, when you focus and try to lift your own karma. But you can be, it's very quantum leap, like you're helping people and then their lives help more help is spreading. And so it seems like on the other side, so much good is done from just helping randomly as much as possible in little ways, like just soup kitchens. Great idea. Think about how many people it affects. And, that might be a part of the plan, is that, faith without works is dead. So check out what Yeshua did for people. Way cooler than just sitting there trying to be impressive, actually interacting with them as much as possible. Could he stop leprosy? I mean, there still exists in the world leprosy, but like, could it have been stopped by one person? Maybe because he's God, but also maybe because if everyone works together to keep making sure that they're healing everyone who has leprosy, then the problem will go away, And so there's a lot of logic beyond just the miraculous level of it. There's a lot of logic to what Christ was teaching, because it shows results. It works, right?
Completely, yeah. And this is a huge thing. I mean, just talking about healing, to go on a little sidetrack there. So much of Christianity or a lot of Christianity is cessationist, where they believe that the gifts of the Holy Spirit were active for the early Christians.
Yeah.
But then they stopped. And
right. And you should just deal with that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And luckily, this friend of mine, it was funny. I was at this festival, summer camp. It's a festival out in Illinois, and it's like a jam band festival. And for a while, I was going to festivals and walking in purity and just sharing Jesus through joy. I was just like dancing, celebrating. And this brother came up to me while I was dancing, and I would have a cross on, or some like form of some Jesus paraphernalia, like the jacket I gave you.
Jesus jacket, I was gonna say.
Yeah. I was hoping we could wear this.
I really wish I had mine right here. I have to get it soon. I'm gonna get it.
Yeah, for sure.
He gave me this jacket that's covered with a painting of Christ, and there's also like I think there's some. Is it Mary?
I have it, so I'll bust it up.
Yeah. This is like how I actually met this guy. I was like, "Hey, dude, cool jacket," and he's like, "Oh yeah, you want it?" I'm like, "Wait, what?" I mean, look how cool this jacket is. Like, this is amazing. And yeah,
I don't know if I can show all the details here, but
it's like so intricate. Yeah. I have one back in Santa Cruz, but the world shifted very quickly when COVID happened, and it was during a fire, so I didn't really have my heat, like my winter clothes with me. So it's still in my closet in my bedroom, but
yeah,
I love that jacket.
Yeah, so like I was at this festival, I just had a cross on and I was shirtless and I was dancing joyously. And this brother came up to me and was like, "Man, could I pray with you?" And we had this like great prayer session, and then was like, "You need to meet my friend. My friend, like, he goes up to people and he prays for them, and he's seen people healed of everything imaginable." Whoa. And these were teachings that like really came to me through the Ascension teachings. And actually, one person I should mention, I feel like my heart opened up to Jesus through Annalie Scarron, who's kind of this obscure Mormon Ascension theologian, I guess. She's kind of a hybrid of all the Theosophical Society and the I Am activity. Some of the things she says are too far out for me in terms of like, I don't know. I think she embraces that Enoch idea that we can reach this level of perfection where we just walk into heaven.
That's very Latter-day Saint.
Yeah, but she was excommunicated. She her philosophy was too much for them. But her teachings are really beautiful because they just really emphasize walking in purity, walking, just in like true righteousness, which I feel gets downplayed within Christianity sometimes, where you can just kind of bank on, Jesus having died on the cross. But yeah, so she would teach, and the Ascension teachings would really emphasize, like, Jesus is teaching that greater works than these will you do, that all the things Jesus did, we can do. And I thought that was possible. Huh?
And more.
Yeah. And I thought that was possible, but I didn't even know how to get started with that. And even after like following Jesus for 3 years, still like, I don't know, I didn't know what to do. And then I met this guy who told me about his friend. His friend, we went to Electric Forest. I went there to do like more ministry. This was when I was just doing festival ministry. Now I've walked away from that because I don't know. I feel like I'd rather give the money that it takes to go to a festival to help Africa or something. Like I don't totally know how much fruit I'm bearing by going to festivals. So till like I'm ever get clear about that, I don't know if I'll be returning to that. But
there are circumstances where a psychedelic Jesus character will save someone's life or their psyche. So
Oh, I've had. I mean, it was amazing. The connections I made at festivals were so incredible. But yeah, I mean, yeah, no, it is. It's worth $300.
Yeah.
If you make a deep connection with someone where they go off of like a path of like crazy drug usage, whatever it is, and then start walking with
God.
Yeah,
I know people in Africa that if you gave $300 to, that would like change their life. So yeah,
yeah, definitely, just basic necessities. So I went to Electric Forest and I met this guy's friend. He walked around Electric Forest with me for 5 minutes and just basically gave me a transmission of like how to heal. And he alleviated all the doubts I had. I always felt like, oh, what if I go and pray for someone and they don't get healed? Are they going to stop believing in God? Is it going to mess with their faith? And he just reassured me, like, whenever you pray for someone, they're going to feel something. They're going to feel some peace. They're just going to be grateful that you prayed for them. A lot of people don't expect to get healed, right, from the prayer. So just like go for it and don't worry about it. And from there, I started praying with a lot of people. And it took about 6 months until I do this hospital ministry, which is connected to Matthew 25, when my path shifted. It's like, okay, I can meditate, but my whole life doesn't have to be meditation. I'll focus more on service. And it started with soup kitchens, which you mentioned. I was like, okay, what can I do? Soup kitchens. Just like, great way to get started. Yeah. And I did like 3 soup kitchens a week. That expanded into prison ministry because people who volunteered at the prison, juvenile prison, came into the soup kitchen to volunteer. And it was just beautiful how everything started to go off from there. And prison ministry has been a huge focus of the past decade of my life since following Jesus.
Awesome.
So yeah, like I also have been doing hospital ministry, and I was at the hospital with this woman. It's a rehabilitation center, and she couldn't move her fingers. Her hands were just like this. She couldn't move them. And we prayed in Jesus' name, like, let this hand be healed. And then I asked her if she could try something she couldn't do before. And she went like this.
Whoa.
And we were like, what? Yeah, we were so excited. And we showed the nurse. The nurse was like amazed. And from there, my faith just shot up. And then I was like praying for people and seeing like tons of healings. I've seen like a stroke victim get completely healed. He had no feeling on the left side of his body. And we prayed. And then I asked him if he could try doing something. I didn't know about that. We were sitting down when we actually prayed. And he told me he couldn't feel anything. And he raised his arm. And then he started walking. He was like, well, I couldn't do that before. And he was, just so, both of us were so happy. It was amazing. But yeah,
do you think that there's like, I mean, sorry, but it's just such an amazing thing. Like, do you think that part of it is just psychosomatic? Like maybe they just believe it enough. It's like voodoo, or is it? And I mean, it seems like a miracle. This sounds like straight.
It is a miracle. It is a miracle.
Yeah.
But this
is hard to say that in today's world, but that would be.
It's definitely a miracle, but it's this is the cool thing. So then I start to get more into just this whole branch of Christianity that's very into healing. And this friend who I met at Electric Forest, he told me to watch this film called Finger of God, which if you could bring that up, every film by Darren Wilson is worth seeing. He's done 6 documentaries, and the first documentary, Finger of God is the first one he did. The cinematography is horrible. It's just him with the camera going around, but everything he documents, the cinematography is so bad that I was like, I don't know if I can watch this after the first 10 minutes. But this friend of mine hyped it up so much that I was like, okay, I'll sit through this. And it's a film I recommend to everyone because it was so powerful. Everything he documents is amazing. And he goes to this place, Bethel, which is a school in, it's a church in Redding, California, but they have a school called the Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry. And Bethel, if anyone gets a chance to go to Bethel,
is this Bethel in Santa Scotts Valley or no?
No, it's in Redding.
Right.
Yeah, they have other churches, and so there might be a Bethel offshoot. Their politics, I don't even want to get it. I mean, this is like Jesus protect me from your followers.
Yeah, right.
It's like, the politics I don't connect with, but everything happening there is remarkable, apart from maybe the politics.
Yeah.
And they have these healing rooms on Saturday, and Finger of God depicts that, where it's they just show what goes on at the school. And that was the first time I saw just documentary footage of people getting healed. And around that time I had met someone who also had a really powerful healing experience where she prayed for someone who had scoliosis in her spine. And she prayed for an older woman, and she prayed, and then she felt as she was praying all the vertebrae just clicking into place.
Whoa.
And the woman got completely healed, no longer had to wear a back brace, anything like that. So as I started to hear these stories, I was like, I really need to go for this, because one, Jesus is saying to do it. Jesus is saying, go heal the sick, go pray for people and see them get healed. But definitely Darren Wilson's films, Father of Lights, that's the second one in the series. That one might be a better one to start with, just because after Finger of God, people are like, this is amazing. And I think he got a lot of assistance in terms of filming and everything. That's a great one. And it goes to India. There's an incredibly powerful scene in there in India with a sadhu.
Wow.
Yeah, both the sadhu and the man who prays for him had received inspiration the night before that they were supposed to meet. And they have this incredible encounter. But from there, I really went on this path of healing. And the beautiful thing about what this branch of the church teaches is that these aren't miracles. Within Catholicism, we think of this stuff as miraculous. Only saints can do this stuff. But no, this is for all believers. All believers can go out and pray for people and see them get healed. And it's not, there's nothing special about the person praying. This is what I spoke with my friend in Michigan about. He was saying that for him, it was so difficult to accept when he first started getting into prayer, healing prayer, was he felt like, I'm not good enough. Like, why would you use me, God, to pray for people and see them get healed? And the thing he kept hearing, sensing from the Holy Spirit is, it's not about you, it's about Jesus.
Right. Have you seen some of the other saints? No, I'm just kidding. But some of these saints started out lower, is all I'm saying. And all it is to be a saint is to perform 3 miracles in the name of God. So
I think those miracles, according to Catholicism, don't they have to be performed after you die? I'm pretty sure it's after.
It's after you die.
You've died, if people have prayed to that saint.
Catholics. Yeah. In my opinion, if you perform 3 miracles before or after death, I'll count them. That's all I'm saying. Personally.
Yeah. Well, also according to like actual New Testament teachings, like all followers of Jesus are saints. It really takes away the vanity of sainthood.
Right.
That's not this thing that we should. And it becomes this weird pride thing within Catholicism.
Well, do you have recommendations for someone that wants to, pursue this sort of like a philosophical spiritual path, do they go to read a specific book, or what do you think?
There is, I think the book is Essential Healing by Bill Johnson and Randy Clark. I believe that's the title. But definitely it's co-authored by Bill Johnson and Randy Clark. Yeah, Essential Guide to Healing. This is where I started. Also, I have zero interest in self-promotion, but I wrote a blog about this on this trip I went on. And it's called, if you Google Theophilus Donahue, How to Heal, in a lot less words than this, it kind of breaks down everything. And that's through the World Race. Yeah, so just that How to Heal one.
I think we cheated at the whole thing with the maybe
Yeah.
surprise. This is me. I could do you want me to share this, or do you want me to send? I could cut this part or send a link because it's your name.
It doesn't matter, but yeah, it doesn't matter.
You can send me, if you want to send me the link, I can proxy it. I could hide it. I don't know.
I don't think it matters. I'm open
Okay.
for yeah, you can identify me as Theophilus Donahue. I'd prefer to not have, I just don't want like Google searches coming up.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Also because I don't know. Yeah. I'm in the process of applying to divinity schools in order to become a chaplain.
Nice.
And in that application process, I don't want anything that could be seen as like, like kind of not conservative to be circulated.
Right.
But yeah, for the show, it's cool. But
Yeah, I'll use a proxy link to put through the description for people to find it, so that if it is on there, then it has to go through the Tartary Nova server, and that way it won't make like a Google link to it.
yeah. But How to Heal is the only thing on there, which I feel like that the reason I wrote that is because I felt and I'll say what I wrote was basically a paraphrase of what this person told to me at Electric Forest. And I was just so grateful how he just broke it down so simply. And I feel this is basically what he taught me, my friend John. And it's an easier way. Like, you don't need to know more than this. You don't need to know more than what's here. You could read a whole book about it if you want, but that's pretty much all the information you need to go out and pray for people to get healed.
I got two more questions, if that's all right with you. One is about the end of days, because that's always fun. I think everyone's always, I love that bumper sticker, Jesus is coming, look busy. And the other question's about prayer, just so you know, but you can go ahead. What is your favorite of those two? Start with whichever one you want.
We could talk about end times. I thought one thing we were going to get into a little bit based on our conversation, which we could tie into this, is the connection with Islam a little bit as well.
Yeah.
I mean, that's definitely where a lot of my heterodox ideas come in, is just feeling that Muslims aren't going to hell.
Yeah.
Some Christians are like desperate to save Muslims.
I don't know.
Yeah. Saving jihadists, I could understand that.
Yeah, but that's the same as saving Westboro Baptists, they're bad Christians or bad Muslims.
Yeah, but I mean, saving Muslims who are like possibly trying to kill people. Okay, I understand that.
Yeah.
But in general, I feel like Muslims, I don't know. I read the Quran after following Christ, and that was another one, which like I love Sufism, but as I try to get into the Quran, I was like, every single page mentions hell. It's like very intense. So yeah, I personally just feel like if you are a devout Muslim and you're growing up with these teachings, with the Quran, which is saying like anyone who deviates from this path is going to hell. If anyone tries to convert you out of this path, they're going to hell. It's just like every page is hell. Like, you can't be.
It talks about how Allah turned us out of gorillas and pigs into men, and that if we don't keep praying, he's already done it. He'll turn you back into gorillas and pigs. I forget the exact versage, but the idea of reincarnation and the punishment of not fulfilling your Islam, which is the submission to what God wants of you rather than your own existential choices. I mean, it is at very least clearly influenced by the Veda, and you can see their interactions with each other in India. So there's little question that they have a deeper cosmology and cosmogony than we accepted Islam having for whatever reason. That's funny because they have star globes and stuff, but
that's amazing. Like I've overlooked that passage, and this, I really want to search out those passages within the Western religions, because within Christianity there's also a hint of it, and Elizabeth Clare Prophet spoke about this in her teachings, which is that there's a part in the Bible where Jesus's disciples encounter this blind man with Jesus, and they ask Jesus, why is this man blind? Why he was born blind? So why was he born blind? Was he born blind because of his sins, because of his parents' sins? It goes on, but the idea that he could have sins before he was born points to reincarnation. I mean, how else can you have sins before you're born, besides original sin? Course.
Unless maybe being blind isn't necessarily a punishment per se, or it's like but yeah, it could.
Yeah, and Jesus answers it. He says, like, no, he was born blind in order, because Jesus healed him, basically, right. To bring glory to God. Jesus healed him. It's like, this was the purpose.
It was all a setup for this punchline. Yeah. That's what I mean. Jesus is a prankster. I like it.
But then also John the Baptist, that there's an idea that John the Baptist was Elijah. So there are like small things which kind of hint at reincarnation. So it's not completely heretical to pose that idea. But just with Islam, like if you grow up with those teachings, it's going to be very difficult to break free of those teachings. And my general understanding is that I believe in a merciful God. I believe in a God who is not just trying to trick people and punish people, Bill Hicks, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Like
I do know Bill Hicks.
We're familiar with Bill Hicks. Bill Hicks has a joke about believing in dinosaurs, where like someone gets to heaven and they're quizzed on like if they believed in dinosaurs or not, and then they get sent to hell. Oh no, it seems so plausible. But yeah, like I definitely don't think that God is trying to trick people. And my understanding with Islam, we discussed this on our own, it's just like I pray to God, like, God, why did Islam come along? Islam's like the last major religion after Christianity. We have the freedom in Christianity. We have the freedom from the Hindu path, the Buddhist path, this reincarnation stuff. We have the freedom from the Mosaic law. We're set free through Jesus. Why then introduce this other like very complex system? And what I've intuited is that Islam is here to check Christianity, to check the freedom of Christianity. Because early Christians, the first 3 years of Christianity, it's the age of the martyrs. When you mention the Crusades, like that was never like Jesus never wanted anyone to go out and kill people. And like the first three centuries, or is it? The first 3 centuries of Christianity, it was the age of the martyrs, and Christians were just willing to go out and share the gospel. And there's a great book, The Case for Christ. I read that book because I met an agnostic who became Christian after reading that book. I was like, okay, if he became Christian, I just want to at least familiarize myself with it. And in that book, a big emphasis is about why did how were all these early Christians willing to die for this belief, if it wasn't true, if Jesus wasn't a historical figure and none of this stuff happened, these people.
There was an interesting thought, I think of Matthew 10:34 through 36, right? Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and a person's enemies will be those of his own household. See, I can see why some of the Christians really like Trump. It's very divisive language in Matthew 10. But I don't know, is that what does that mean? Because everyone's like, wait, Jesus with a sword instead of what's the deal?
Jesus speaks in parables, so like everything, a lot of what Jesus says is metaphorical.
It's definitely not fair to show one verse either, because there's a lot of context.
Yeah,
but
Jesus is not talking about an actual sword there, slicing your family, like this is just creating division. And it's true. It's like if you're, I mean, a good example would be a Muslim. If you're a Muslim and you grow up in this very rigid Islamic framework, and everyone around you is believing this, and then you decide, I'm going to follow Jesus, and you break apart, that's the sword. It's like not keeping up. Jesus isn't totally interested in good vibes, like everything just has to be like chill all the time and everyone gets along. Like, no, if this belief, which is ultimately going to set you free, if it's going to create some dissension where like there's just friction between you and family and friends because you're adopting a belief that other people don't, then you got to go for it. Don't be afraid to step on people's toes with that. But yeah, with Islam, just praying on this, I just feel like, so these early Christians after the Age of Martyrs, I mean, they're starting to associate with the Roman Empire, and they're getting more caught up in, when in Rome, do as the Romans, like orgies, whatever,
Right.
There's probably a bunch of Christians who feel they could be engaged in just that kind of lifestyle, licentious lifestyle, and still have this promise of redemption. And then Islam is just here to like, no, like this is actually, it's kind of like just redirecting, getting people back on course. Like, this is what righteousness is. Now, at the same time, it's like a hyper righteousness, which is way too much. And it brings back.
It literally has a sword, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And it brings back the Mosaic Law. It brings back Judaism and just all these like strict laws we have to follow. And by Islam rejecting Jesus as Savior, as Messiah, just viewing him as a prophet, that doesn't create that redemption element for them. So for them, like they actually do have to follow all these teachings they've been assigned. And if they follow them, I do believe they will go to heaven. If they step away from them and decide, I'm just going to follow Jesus, I'm going to maybe have a glass of wine or eat a little pork, whatever it may be, and like just have a more casual relationship with God, but walk in righteousness, then I believe that freedom is definitely there for them with Jesus. If they're trying to do that under the banner of Islam, I don't know,
right.
And Islam says that, like, Allah will judge. It's unclear who actually gets saved, but I definitely feel there's this like firm. It's you can't go wrong with Jesus. That's what I felt. I could go wrong with Saint Germain. I could go wrong with kind of these other more obscure figures, but I can bank on Jesus. I'm not going to die and be dealing with this Bill Hicks God who's like, okay, yeah, we've got this Christian calendar. Everything is dated based on Jesus, and we've got the Bible is like the #1 book. Everyone's talking about the Bible, and you believed in this, and sorry, like I don't know how you believed in this, but you're gonna have to reincarnate, go meditate in a cave for like 8 more lifetimes, and then maybe you can get to heaven. I know God is merciful, God is trustworthy, and that I can trust in the New Testament and then die and receive this freedom from suffering.
Islam is really interesting because it seems like it's all about how you can't avoid the work, so that's just something it's a lot of Christians saying to convert Islam or to convert Muslims, but they work a lot at their faith, 5 prayers a day, all this other stuff, right? So I mean, do Christians need to learn more from Islam, or what? Because also, what is Christianity at this point? Do we have to just divorce our ideas of, are today's Christians even Christians from our understanding of what it means to be a Christian?
Christianity is so broad, but getting back to what you're saying, I mean, just with Islam, I mean, that like I'm personally, I see Christians wanting to convert Muslims. I'm terrified of converting a Muslim because I'm like, man, a lot of Muslims I know are on very righteous paths.
Yeah.
To cut alcohol out of your life, to cut pork. I mean, it's better Hinduism and Buddhism cutting out. I'm personally vegetarian, but like cutting out all the
It's a
animal
start,
stuff.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a start. Pork, that's a start. So for me to possibly share Jesus with a Muslim and then they introduce alcohol and pork into their life, I'm like,
Wow.
I don't want to be doing this, but at the same time, I want them to feel freedom. So I will share Jesus with a Muslim who I feel is kind of oppressed by their faith. And I've met Muslims like that who just feel weighed down by their faith. They don't like praying 5 times a day. I mean, especially, just the ritual 5 times a day, that becomes a burden for them. And I don't feel God is going to force that on them if they want to adopt a more Christian viewpoint. But yeah.
So what about the end of days? What do you think about the end of days coming? Is it coming soon to a theater near you?
Probably to a theater near you. But yeah, in terms of actually happening, I don't know. Jesus says no one knows the day or the hour, right? So it's like you can't really say anything about it. I love how like everything is synced up between the faiths. Yeah, there's definitely Islam eschatology matches Christian eschatology.
And late Veda, the idea that we're hitting like a final avatar form, the Veda's into that too.
Yeah. I saw David Wilcock talk. I'm not too into his stuff. It's Wilcock, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes I mix it up with Wilcox. He brought to my attention just
actually now I have to remember.
Is it Wilcock or Wilcox? I've only seen one talk of his.
Right, yeah.
And yeah, cool. I saw one talk because my cousin is like very into his stuff. For me, it's like I don't connect with it. But he mentioned in one of his talks how, what is it? I don't know the precise name for it. Is it the Kali avatar? I think that's it. The Kali avatar is depicted as coming to kind of clear out this age, riding on a white horse, with a sword. It matches Revelation, and so the fact that all these major faiths are synced up in this way, there's something to it, I feel.
But Kali is supposed to be kind of a decent, like she's not quite the whore of Babylon, right? Like, cause she's like trying to pick up skulls before they hit the ground to save the world.
But this isn't Kali. It's not Kali return. It's like the avatar of the Kali Yuga.
Oh, okay.
So it's a different figure as far as I know. But just seeing like how everything's lined up that way. I love how like in the Bible, there's like so many times when like God's like, I'm gonna destroy this place. I'm gonna like, this person's gonna die now.
Yeah.
And then like some prophet comes in and is like, can we just not have that happen? Can we just put, and like humans are able to negotiate God all throughout the Bible.
Right.
It's all throughout. So I'm constantly praying like, God, please just like tear open the heavens right now, just reveal yourself. Like all this confusion about like, is there a God? Is there not a God for any atheists and agnostics? Let just be dispelled completely. And let us just have heaven, just a realm where no one can kill each other. Sure, like God wants us to have free will, but let's just like create this realm where we can have complete free will, but we can't kill each other. And I think that would be close to heaven, like no accidents, no killing, and also just like a connection with God. For some people who wrestle with that, they would know that God is real and we can just kind of abide. So that's what I'm praying for. Meanwhile, there are these teachings, and I don't know. I feel personally, my intuition is that it's not going to happen within our lifetime. This like apocalypse thing. I think according to how things seem to be lined up, we're like in the end times, but the end times are an extensive time period. It's not like the last like 5 years or something. This can go on for another 100, 200, who knows.
I'll feel more certain about that in 5 years. Like, because I feel like we're at this major vista. It's a, what does Ray Kurzweil call it? The event horizon.
Mm.
So you're at a point where you can see so many different possible conclusions to this moment that it's blurry. It's impossible to know. Could it be the end of everything? Yeah, I think so. Honestly, just about as much as it could not. Like, and there's so many other options than that. So it's an infinitesimal possibility, but we are getting to a point where, more relevantly, transhumanism and things are starting to affect the humanities as a species itself. And that could be the end of humanity. I mean, it could become the beginning of something else, and it could be whatever it is, but it could be that people become immortal or not, and then that's the end of the old ways. Death has been, disease and famine have been widespread. There can be an even more novel form of it.
Yeah. Two things on that note. I mean, one, it's an interesting question to ask right now, because looking at the news today and yesterday, yeah, tomorrow could be the end of the world. Nuclear missiles going off, like all these different things. So I love how Jesus says, like, no one knows the day or the hour. And I do juvenile prison ministry, and a lot of times interacting with like these teenagers and stuff, a lot of them will ask about that. And I keep bringing it back to the most important thing is we're going to die as individuals.
Yeah.
So just being prepared, and we definitely don't know when that's going to happen. So being prepared for our individual deaths, just being in a good place with God and the way we're walking in our personal lives, that's the most important question. When everything collectively comes to an end, I don't know.
Yeah. And the other thing is, you said you prayed for that, and so that was my other and kind of last question is, what do you think about prayer? Is prayer asking of God? Is it what's it for? And how does it compare to meditation? And because you used to meditate a lot, so
yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. Like I was very into meditation, Vipassana in particular. Yeah. Vipassana seemed like a really powerful practice.
Clearly is.
Yeah. Have you done Vipassana?
Yeah, I went to a retreat once, and it was like a 12-day thing where we got to fast and have a banana, I think was about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was like, I now can sit for a long time though, which is amazing.
It's intense. Yeah, for anyone who doesn't know about Vipassana, you do these retreats, they're completely free, at least through Goenka. Goenka is like the one.
The one I went to was free,
Yeah. And at the end of it, if you feel you benefited from it, then you could donate for the next course. Yeah. But you basically meditate for 8 to 10 hours a day, and it's completely silent. And you do that every day for 10 days.
I think I'm so scared to say this. I'm not a medical or spiritual expert, but I can't see how it would harm, and I do think it might help almost every person to try Vipassana at least once. Do like a 7-day thing. Just try it.
I felt that way for a while until the last course I did, and then coming out of that, I realized I will never recommend this to anyone. Just because it's like entering the hell realm in some ways, because it is really intense. And there's points at that retreat. I mean, when you hit that middle stage of like day 6, where you're like, okay, I've gone far enough where like I can't leave at this point. I mean, I could, but I just feel like I want to.
It felt like so weird because your whole body changing too, because you're sitting and you're not eating, and like it just felt like a lot at once.
Yeah,
but it was
good.
This
is the cool thing about like Buddha. It's strange in like Thailand and different places where people view Buddha as this like Lord. Like I don't know, people go to temple and like worship Buddha, but Buddha definitely is not saying to do that. And I view Buddha more as a scientist. That's why I kind of feel Buddha's teachings are compatible with Christianity, minus the reincarnation aspect, or thinking that you have to like attain nirvana to attain freedom or whatever. So Buddha, like he just tapped into this reality that like if you observe sensations on the body, all these knots, all these stored traumas get released. And it's as simple as that. It's just sitting and observing sensation. But yeah, what was the connection with meditation
and prayer?
I guess meditation, you've probably heard this though, like meditation is, prayer is when we speak to God, and meditation is when we hear from God. Have you heard that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot to that. My style of meditation has changed, where I focus more on joy and bliss, kind of like bhakti in Hinduism, where you're just like this, I think, is the best meditation anyone can do.
Right.
Is to just close your eyes and just smile, even if you don't feel happiness. Like you just smile, and then if you do that, I guarantee if you do that for an hour every day, you will start to feel happiness. Like you will feel so much joy, and that smile is connected to God. You know, it's not some like random thing. Like just smiling, feeling God's presence in your heart. That was a big practice I did for a long time. It's just like that for an hour a day. And it became this refuge. I have this place inside me where like I can go, I've moved away from it now. For a while I was like kind of desperate to preserve it. Like with the festival ministry, all these different things is like all about maintaining bliss and high states. And then I would have to go away from it because I do the prison ministry. You go into prisons, you can't be like joyous, eye gazing with people. You know, you have to like kind of tone it down and go into more darker spaces. And over the years, I've just developed such a love for learning as well. Like I can't read literature just like smiling simultaneously. You know, like I love to be able to leave that space. And at the same time, by doing that meditation, knowing that it's something I could always return to, it's that kingdom of heaven inside, which Jesus spoke about, in which Eckhart Tolle, I feel, kind of corrupted, you know, so just by saying like, it's only like, Eckhart Tolle like really preached some like incorrect doctrine about Jesus only said the kingdom of heaven is within. Jesus did not only say that. You know, the kingdom of heaven is within, and Jesus definitely also points to it as this external realm. But yeah, definitely meditating on that and being able to access that, that's crucial. So now it's kind of this hybrid of like meditating, feeling God's love, smiling, and then yeah, sending out prayers. And the prayers are really for the world in general, praying for just peace, you know, no all wars to end. I think ever since I was a little kid, I'd pray for handicapped people to get healed. I was always terrified of like becoming blind or deaf. I was like, please let these people be healed. So yeah, definitely sending out prayers for anyone in need, for sure.
Man, that's awesome. Well, I mean, I hope you had come back. You know, like it'd be pretty easy to sneak you into a panel. Like the alien robots have no oversight over that, so you could probably be fine.
Yeah,
I appreciate that you took the time to share all this wisdom with us.
Thank you for having me on. It's been such a fun way to reconnect.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk more in the future. There's some thoughts I have more. I mean, Islam and history in general, St. Augustine, it'd be really good to go into Manichaeism and the differences between dualism and believing that God is the greatest part that has evil as a creation inside of it, but not a dynamic equal equivalence or something.
Yeah. And just one thing on that note, just because it's and it ties into something we were saying earlier, like that is the idea of like heaven being boring. You know, if it gets to that point where like all the external creativity becomes too much and you just like aren't interested in the dualism anymore, then that's where that non-dualistic Advaita approach comes in, where I feel like we can kind of merge with God and just exist in that state of peace, you know, joy, non-dualistic awareness. And then from there, that might get boring. And you might be like, hey, I kind of want to play around and deal with duality again, and then merge into a different experience.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there any more like links you want to share, or place, or any other wisdom that anything you want to say, you know, as we close?
Not really. I had some notes coming into this, but I think we spoke about most of it. The one thing which I was going to share is Isaiah 53. I don't know if you've ever looked into that much, but that's an interesting passage within the Jewish Bible, and it's part of the Christian Bible.
I forget which one that is. Which one is that, Isaiah 53? I'll pull it up here.
Yeah, I have it here. But it's a passage which describes, I don't know, there's pretty much no way to read this, I don't think, and not think that it's talking about Jesus. and it's completely from the Jewish scriptures. That's one thing. When we spoke about end times, how like everything lines up except Judaism, I still feel like perhaps that might be the revelation. And I'm half Jewish. My dad was Jewish, but within Judaism, there's this idea of Messiah within different sects of Judaism. And if Jesus was rejected as Messiah initially by the Jewish community, now Jesus was very much embraced by the Jewish community because all Jesus's early followers were Jewish, so it's not like Judaism rejected Jesus. Jesus was Jewish, his followers were Jewish, but if parts of Judaism rejected Jesus, I sort of feel like when Jesus returns, in this like second coming, which aligns with Islam and now I guess, the avatar from Hinduism, I think that will kind of be like the first coming for Judaism, where there will be this like, I don't know, revelation of Jesus as Messiah. And it's interesting, like Judaism's so connected with Christianity, where like many Christians, within Christianity, there's this belief that Jesus will not return until a large portion of the Jewish community embraces Jesus as Messiah. So definitely like Messianic Judaism, all that. But yeah, that passage you had up, I feel that passage, it points to kind of what's the main thing that Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are debating about. And a lot of Islam will reject Christians because they feel that, we can't call Jesus Lord, like you can't call a human God. And same with, I guess, elements of Judaism, where it's like you can't, like Jesus saying that like God is his father, like everything seems a little off with that. Yeah, but if that passage is taken into account, I don't believe that we're going to be quizzed when we die on our theology completely.
Right.
Where it's like, okay, did you believe Jesus was Messiah? Like if that's going to be asked to Muslims. I think it's more about, did you accept Jesus as your redeemer? Do you believe that Jesus died on the cross to free you? Jesus took your debt upon him. And Isaiah 53 really describes that. It's kind of more described as a prophet who comes along and,
right,
just dies for many to be redeemed.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I've seen this connected with the idea of Muhammad, even though because of the prophet thing. But it's more because it says, to divide. First off, all this horrible stuff's happened, and the world's gotten crazy, and then Isaiah acknowledges it, and then prophesizes that there's going to be an atonement that's going to come. But it's really from God creating the atonement and delivering the atonement into our hands.
Yeah, and this line in particular. Verse 4, surely he took up our pain. I might have a different translation. I have an astigmatism, so I'm just going to read from Bible.
Yeah, sure.
Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering, yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. That it's tough to read that and not really think about Jesus.
Sounds familiar. Yeah, exactly.
And I think even with Islam's viewing Jesus as a prophet, if they believe that he was a prophet who really died for their iniquity, then there's that redemption as well.
That is an interesting one. We'll have to get into that next time. I think that is a huge one. The Emmanuel question, it's a big piece. But thank you for your time.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me on. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, let's definitely do it soon.
Definitely.
The world is very different now. For man holds in his mortal hand the power to abolish all forms of human poverty and all forms of human life.
begins a very special time of the year for us. It's the time of peace and reflection. One thing we should all be thankful for is that we live in America, where we have the freedom to change things and the opportunity to grow.
I, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, do solemnly swear
That you will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States
And will, to the best of your ability,
and will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
So help you God.
So help me God.